Thank you. I'm one half of the group called those damn Yankees that was referred to here earlier. My other counterpart is Don Tackett. He's the other part of them. So obviously we feel just a little bit on the exposed side down here. So we will try to mind our manners so we don't get shot full of all kinds of holes later on today. Basically what has happened here is Don Erickson kind of gave you a good overview of the topographical engineers and up to a certain point just prior to the war. And then of course my counterpart Evan has kind of given the other view. So actually everything that has preceded what I'm going to say, everything they've done is a good segue into what we're going to present today. To kind of give you a little bit of a background of the topographical engineers, and when you're dealing with the Army, there's some weird things that happen, so hopefully this will kind of give you an idea of why these things happen and why all of a sudden one day a person's a general, the next day a person might be a lieutenant. Okay. The U.S. Military Academy at West Point, after the Revolutionary War, the first cabinet urged the creation of a institution that was devoted to the arts and sciences of warfare. And of course, during the Revolutionary War, we as a country pretty much had to rely on foreign influences for our engineers and artillerists. Okay. In 1802, Jefferson establishes the Military Academy. It's also put under the established with the Corps of Engineers, and then also the politicians want the Corps to contribute to military construction and works of a civil nature. This came to be when Colonel Thayer became the father of the Military Academy. He served as superintendent, and under his tutelage, civil engineering became the Academy's curriculum. So the USMA were largely responsible for the construction of the bulk of the nation's infrastructure during that time. If you wanted to get a good education, you could go to Harvard or you go to Yale, and there you'd learn rhetoric and logic and religion, or you could go to the U.S. Military Academy and get a real degree. Don, of course, Captain Erickson discussed Robt and his that the Topographic Bureau was established in 1818, and in 1938 it became a separate Corps of Topographical Engineers. And as a result of that, these were the surveyors, the explorers, the cartographers. By the way, these are pictures from Don Erickson's. I'm going to give him a little bit of a plug here. He runs a topographical engineering school. Some of you know about it, some of you don't. It's generally in June out at Bent's Old Fort in La Junta, Colorado. Trust me, in 3 days you will definitely learn to hate wool. Bugs, all sorts of critters, but you'll have one corking good time because you literally live the life of a topographical engineer at that point in time. Also, these are some of the most beautiful paintings, as pointed out by my predecessors here, were done. So in other words, you were an artist, you did sketches, you did watercolors. So these were really some of the, this was a wonderful opportunity to get out there and really make a name for yourself. Essentially the Corps basically, when established, was primarily all officers. Colonel, lieutenant, colonel, major, captains, and lieutenants. It was a terribly rigid structure. And of course, military pay, just like it still is today, wasn't that great. So you pretty much were in uniform until you went into the casket. So therefore, you could not advance until the person before you advanced. However, you also wanted to go to West Point to get that wonderful education. So a lot of people went to the went to the military academy, got their education, and resigned because of the structure. In the mid-19th century, the U.S. Army was in three distinct corps, the four arms: the Scientific Corps, General Staff, and the Line. The Scientific Corps essentially was the cream of the crop. These were the engineers, the topographical engineers, and ordnance. So in other words, this is where, so if you, when you graduated, your appointment based on your class rank, if you were at the top of the list, you could go to the Corps of Engineers or Corps of Topographical Engineers, then artillery, then infantry, and then cavalry. So you can imagine where Custer and Pickett and some of the more likable characters arrived. So this kind of gave you a general overview of where you would be and where you would be placed. U.S. Corps of Topographical Engineers, I think probably this is where Don's paper was really, really good. You got to play with really neat toys. You got frontier assignments in the West. Every year there would be a report that would be produced, and this would go to Congress, and your name would be in that report. You got to ride around in the most up-to-date conveyance systems. And not only that, you had all of the voyagers as your servants. I made the mistake at Don's encampment a year ago of going over to wash my own dishes after I had eaten, and I was very quickly told that in office, that's what we have our enlisted personnel for. I found that being an officer was very good. Unfortunately, and I think this is where Don's presentation really pointed out, the topographical engineers were nowhere where the war was going to break out. They were all out west. To give you an idea, Captain George Gordon, probably the other one, one of the best known, and this was not mentioned, was the Great Lakes Survey. It was not done by the Coast Survey. It was done by the Corps of Topographical Engineers. Work begun in 1841, and the last captain that was in charge prior to the breakout of hostilities was Captain George Gordon Meade. He had been a captain, a lieutenant and a captain for a major portion of his life, waiting for the person ahead of him to kick off. Other people that were assigned, Lieutenant Orlando Metcalf Poe was his assistant. Now Poe was kind of interesting character. He's not very well loved down here in the South, since he had a penchant for fire. But essentially what he did is he was looking at, okay, if I go topographical engineers, I can get a little bit faster here, or can I go ordnance and go a little bit faster there? Because he was looking at, I want to make that next step. I want to make that next pay grade, because he just married this sweet young 16-year-old that he wanted to support in a very nice lifestyle. Well, he finally decided to go with the topographical engineers rather than ordnance, and was assigned to the Great Lakes Survey, and he did all the primary triangulation. The another person that was mentioned, in fact, was really amazing. As you listen, you had many of the great commanders of the Civil War listed with the topographical engineers. Warren, another example, where he was out west. So they were not near where the outbreak of the hostilities were. So these are some of the individuals. Rogues Gallery, if you were here in the South. The war between the states caught the Army with less than 1,000 officers and 17,000 regulars, totally unprepared. And the Corps of Engineers and topographical engineers were terribly understaffed.